Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandra Pat. I'm the administrator to the Cedars-Sinai Alumni Association. Our speaker this evening, as you know, is Dr. Leo Gordon, a longtime member of the medical staff in the Department of Surgery. Dr. Gordon's presentations are legendary throughout the entire medical center. Over the years, he has educated, entertained, and inspired us with fascinating and interesting stories of medicine. He has discussed the creation of the mural, Jewish Contributions to Medicine, which is right here. He has presented remarks on physician self-experimentation, doctors who experimented on themselves prior to experimenting on their patients. He discovered for us a remarkable clandestine medical school in a Warsaw ghetto during World War II. He has reviewed for us the medical and ethical controversies surrounding the remarkable Pernkopf Anatomy Atlas. And of course, his presentation on presidential illnesses was a classic. Most recently, he delivered remarks commemorating the medical advances that came out of the June 6, 1944 D-Day landing. It was called Miracles on the Beach. Tonight, he will present his analysis of a signature event in world medical history, Boston's Cocoanut Grove fire of 1942. So ladies and gentlemen, get out your programs, put your Cocoanut Grove lapel pin on. Let's travel back in time to Boston. Dr. Gordon.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you all for coming. Sandy, the first thing I have to do is congratulate you because that is the shortest introduction of any speaker in the 125-year history of this medical center. So on behalf of the audience, I want to thank you. Usually we start with, before I start, we have some special guests here tonight in the front row from Los Angeles. Fire Department, we have Ronnie Villanueva, the fire chief. We have Stephen Gutierrez, the deputy chief. Jamie Moore, the deputy chief, and Anthony Marone, the Los Angeles County Fire Chief. I can't tell you, fellas, how flattered that you came, and really, really thrilled that you're here. Well, people always want to know how a speaker selects a topic. I've collected memorabilia regarding the Cocoanut Grove fire for many, many years, books, papers, scientific papers, what the collectors call ephemera. I grew up 30 miles from the Cocoanut Grove nightclub, and I always wanted to put these remarks together, but never really had the stimulus to do it until we wound up with a new CEO, Dr. Slavin from Boston, and a new chief of surgery, Dr. Ferroni from Boston. And usually we get these emails occasionally, once or twice a year, but there was an avalanche of Boston hires when the Boston people showed up. And the transition from the city of Boston to the city of Los Angeles is a very interesting transition to observe, because essentially it is the transition from Beacon Hill to Beverly Hill. And I've observed this for years. I'm 44 years into this transition. I'm just about there, not quite yet. So for the new hires in the audience, if you need counseling or have any problems making that transition, I am available. We have a very well-heeled crowd here, you know, a lot of people, but I do want to introduce you to what I call the DNA of the city of Boston and New England. Every great city has signature events that are woven into that particular DNA. And we're going to be hearing a lot about this over the next year as the United States approaches its 250th anniversary. You can start with the Pilgrims, you can go to Paul Revere's Ride, you can go to the Boston massacre, of course, the Boston Tea Party, the Revolutionary War itself, and the beautiful Golden Dome of the State House guiding the ships into Boston Harbor. Of course, the Battle of Bunker Hill. If you're from Boston, you know that's a misnomer. It was actually Breed's Hill. And then some events that are not particularly inspiring but are medically significant, such as the Great Molasses Explosion of 1919 that took 21 lives, and of course the horrible Marathon bombing of several years ago. You think you know a lot of people, but I'm going to introduce you to someone you may not know. I'm going to introduce you to an individual named Prometheus. In mythology, Prometheus did something very bad. He offended the gods on Mount Olympus. And what he did so bad was he stole fire, which was the province of Zeus on top of Mount Olympus, and gave it to us mortals. And by doing that, he opened up the whole floodgate of home and hearth technology and civilized advancement. I don't give out a lot of advice, but one thing I've learned in reading about Prometheus is you don't steal from the gods, because if you do, you will be punished in a manner I will get to at the end of my remarks. People have come up to me and said, you know, Leo, I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life. I never knew there was a fire at the Coconut Grove. Well, the Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel is not the Coconut Grove I'm talking about. I'm talking about this Coconut Grove on Piedmont Street in the Back Bay section of Boston. That particular nightclub was actually named after the Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel, opened up in 1927. I am now unabashedly going to steal a film motif. Chapter 1, Boston, November 1942. We are sitting here in the friendly confines of the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center on a beautiful June evening with the greats of medicine looking down upon us. But I'm going to ask you to do a little time travel. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath, because we're going to go back to the city of Boston in November of 1942. And we're going to try to capture what the Germans call zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is a beautiful German word that has come into our language. It means the spirit of the times. What was it like to be in Boston in November 1942? Well, America had just come out of the Great Depression. The economy was rebounding. We had been in the war almost a year after the attack in Pearl Harbor, December 1941. But Boston always maintained its vivacity, if you will, because of the colleges and the cultural mix that went on in the city. To get you back to 1942, the Academy Award for Best Picture was awarded to this movie, Mrs. Miniver, which is the story of a British family during the Blitz. Winston Churchill said that the morale boost from Mrs. Miniver was equal to at least 100 battleships. The number one song in America, unfortunately, wasn't sung by my favorites, the Andrews Sisters. It was sung by Bing Crosby, and it was White Christmas. Irving Berlin is not on the wall, but maybe he should be. The Plymouth had just come out, totally redesigned, 1942 Plymouth. The main form of entertainment in 42 was the radio. Men wore hats. I did not find one backward baseball cap in my research for this topic. The jitterbug was certainly popular. There were party lines, no dedicated hardwired phones at home. And you'll notice the car in the middle, there's no automatic transmission, which in the city of Los Angeles is a great anti-theft device because none of the crooks know how to shift a car. But nobody knew that in 1942. Women had entered the workforce because the men had either enlisted or been drafted, and rationing of gasoline had just begun. And here you can see various shots of the city of Boston at that time. I point out in the center of the Hotel Statler that will play a central role in my remarks. And there were some things about Boston that were uniquely Boston, and that was a plethora of nightclubs. Don't forget, Boston at this point is a military city, so you throw the military in with the colleges, and you're going to be seeking an outlet for fun on the weekends. And the pinnacle of nightclubs in the city was the Cocoanut Grove. And I would call your attention to the specific outline of what's called the Melody Lounge. If you look on the back of your program, you'll see that the Melody Lounge was one floor below the main floor for the Cocoanut Grove. And look what you could do for $1.50 on a night on the town. You could get the theater-goers dinner, never a cover charge, I might add. You could dance from 6:30 to 2 with 2 nightly floor shows. You'll note that they had what's called a rolling roof. It can get very humid in the summer in Boston, as those of us who live there know, and the roof would actually roll back in hopes of catching some breeze off of Boston Harbor. It's really quite the place. If you had a drink in one hand, or you couldn't steady both hands, the Cocoanut Grove handed out little clappers so you could applaud the orchestra without clapping your hands together. So here we are on a Thanksgiving weekend, 1942. If you're a little more highbrow, you could go to the Opera or the Symphony, or you could go to the Oval Room at the Copley Plaza. Your Thanksgiving dinner would set you back $3.50. Now, according to my late father, there was a seamy side to the city of Boston. My mother thought he knew too much about this. There were theaters called the Globe, the Old Howard, and the Gaiety. I'll be very delicate. These were burlesque houses. There was nothing obscene. There was nothing truly demeaning. These were burlesque houses where the sailors and the students from all around Boston would go, particularly to see one particular actress, a lady by the name of Anne Curio. Whenever my father mentioned her name, my mother kind of bristled. I think my father spent more time at the Old Howard than I really realized. But can you imagine being a GI in Boston, getting ready to ship out? You go see Anne Curio dancing at the Old Howard, and you get a signed photo. I salute you, soldiers, with love, Anne Curio. That is something you would take with you. Now, despite the cultural differences, despite the economic differences, the religious differences, the neighborhood differences, there was one event on November 28th, 1942, that brought the entire city of Boston together. And it's understandable. It was a sporting event. The undefeated Boston College Eagles were about to play the Holy Cross Crusaders at Fenway Park. And the winner of that game would get a ticket to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. It was a lock. Boston College undefeated, Holy Cross an extremely mediocre record. It was called the Battle of the Jesuits because both of those schools had deep Jesuit roots. So the only problem was, and I show this for reasons which will become evident in a moment, this is the program for the Boston College Holy Cross game at Fenway Park, and you'll notice that the two numbers featured are number 12 and number 55. Number 12 is Mike Holovak, who went on to coach the Bears, I believe. I know he played professional ball. And they would, the Sugar Bowl committee was in town, ready to make the train reservations. Obviously, Boston College was going to win the game. 9-0 against 5-4-1. So really, the only problem for Boston College was pretty simple. Where are we going to go to celebrate our victory? We know we're going to win. Where are we going to go? Well, where else is a victorious football team going to go but to the Cocoanut Grove? And if you didn't like the menu or the food they were serving, you could get the baked lobster for $2.25, which now I think gets you 1 microgram of lobster, but that's for another day. And you will notice that the decor of the Cocoanut Grove was Polynesian. These were all, the decor was copied after the Cocoanut Grove in Los Angeles. A lot of palm fronds, a lot of satin lining the walls. This is a little clip from the game itself, and you'll notice the clips I've selected. Holy Cross is just gaining on every play, and I don't have the exact statistics, and these are men in suits at Fenway. Every pass was completed, and the final score of the game was Holy Cross 55, Boston College 12. It was a stunner. It was one of the greatest upsets in college football. And you can see the shortest lifespan of a headline, and this was scheduled for the next day in the Boston Herald. Boston is now famous for two historical events, the Boston Massacre and the Boston College Massacre. So that headline was in the linotype, ready to roll, except for the events that happened that night. Well, the equipment manager for Boston College, who made the reservations, canceled the reservation. I am going to keep the asterisk there for reasons which will become obvious in a minute. I'm stealing this from Quentin Tarantino. Chapter 2, the Coconut Grove. You couldn't find a place to have more fun. It had dancing, it had music, it had food. It was really the place to be. It opened up in 1927 as the Renard Coconut Grove on Piedmont Street, and you'll notice the name down at the bottom is R.O. Bodenhorn, who was the designer, who, when we get to the fallout of the fire, that name will rear its head again. The Coconut Grove had a very shady past. It was owned for a time by, there's no other way to put it, a gangster by the name of Charlie Solomon. He was known with the nickname King Solomon until he was shot to death in a restroom in Roxbury in 1933. And this is an article from the New York Times where if you believe it, he wasn't Jimmy Cagney, but he's lying slumped, shot in the restroom and says, "Those dirty rats." Well, he died. And King Solomon had a lawyer, as I guess all gangsters do and need, a lawyer by the name of Barney Wolanski. And through some legal finagling, the Coconut Grove ownership devolved to this lawyer, Barnett Wolanski. And he looked at it as a cash cow. He knew he had a hot item on his hands, and he wanted to make the most of it. This is a picture of the actual Coconut Grove. Once again, I'll call your attention to the palm fronds and the lining on the wall. The Coconut Grove had the most sought-after maitre d' in the city among the competitive nightclubs, Angelo Lippi, who must have made a good living seating people either who didn't have reservations or in a crowded night. Now, the Coconut Grove had entertainment, but it wasn't a B-level or a C-level stop on the entertainment tour in America. As you climb the entertainment ladder, you had some of the major names of the big band area. You had the Dorsey Brothers, Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Harry James, and Woody Herman, all playing over the radio, 11:30 every night at the Coconut Grove. And I would point out one other thing. A young up-and-coming singer also appeared there. And I'm sorry, but if you don't know who this is, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. In any event, you had a main dining room, and you'll notice from, and this is a reenactment, by the way, obviously. You'll notice from this clip, you had Mickey Albert, a famous band leader. You had, if you look at the crowd, you'll have a mix of people in uniform. You had the Boston Brahmins, you had the State Street Bankers, you had people that are celebrating weddings, anniversaries, and other significant life events. It was a large place. But it grew in a very illogical manner. The main dining room opened first, and then as the popularity grew, the caricature bar was built, and the one part of this nightclub that's going to play a significant role in this fire is at the bottom of this outline. It's called the Melody Lounge. You'll notice a couple things about it. It's underground, it's small, it has no public exits, and it has one solitary stairway going up to the main dining area. And the little diagram on the right will stress that point. Here's a picture of the Melody Lounge. This was a promotional picture before the decorations were put in, but you can see it's much more intimate than the larger areas of the nightclub. And all kinds of things were going on upstairs. This is a still, that's Mickey Alpert, the band leader, with a promotional tour for a movie called This Is the Army. This was taken about a half an hour before the blaze. The individual who took the photo survived the fire because in those days you took the photo at the table and you went off-site to develop it, and then you picked up the photo when you left for dinner. I don't know if anyone in this room ever heard of Buck Jones, but Buck Jones was the most famous B Western movie actor in 1942. If you were to ask a child in 1942, would you rather be the President of the United States or Buck Jones, they would say, I'd rather be Buck Jones. Buck Jones had the flu. His publicist schlepped him to the football game. It was 28 degrees during the game. All he wanted to do was go back to his hotel. He stopped by the Children's Hospital to talk to the kids and gave this little girl the one sought-after ornament that every kid in America wanted, membership in the Buck Jones Rangers Club of America. He, as many movie stars did, was there on a war bonds tour to raise money for the war effort. Well, James Wolanski, Barney Wolanski's brother, was in charge of the Cocoanut Grove that night. You may ask yourself, where was the owner, Barney Wolanski, that night? In an ironic twist of fate, Barney Wolanski was hospitalized at the Massachusetts General Hospital, recovering from a heart attack. And that story will play out in a few minutes. Now, there's no question that the historical record will show that there was a seedy, dark, criminal underbelly to the Cocoanut Grove. There were copious violations of building codes. There were gangsters. There were thugs. You know, I looked at this and said, you know, that reminds me of the Surgeon's Lounge, but I probably shouldn't say that in open court. Many, many unlicensed workers, particularly when it came to electrical wiring. The decorative materials were bought on the cheap and extremely flammable. Most of the help was underage and underpaid. And Barney Wolanski, when people would question getting permits and getting the proper approval for building, don't worry about it. I'm tight with the mayor, I'm tight with the city council. Just do the work. And of course, fire marshal connections. The fire marshal happened to be having dinner there the night of the fire, and we'll get to that in a minute. So picture this. You got this wonderful place, everybody's having a ball. You have these decorations. You're at the Cocoanut Grove on Thanksgiving night. The approved capacity for the Cocoanut Grove was 460 people. That was what allowed by the city. On the night we're going to talk about, there were 1,000 people at the Cocoanut Grove because Barney Wolanski's job was to make as much money as possible. And interestingly enough, the Cocoanut Grove was registered as a restaurant, not, quote, a place of public gathering, according to the city rules, which gave them a little wiggle room when it came to sprinklers and other methods of fire prevention. Well, I painted the picture. What could possibly go wrong? Which gets us to chapter 3, the fire. We have all of this going on at about 10 p.m. on November 28th, 1942, at the height of the entertainment, at the height of the food service, with the place absolutely jammed about twice capacity. We have a situation in the Melody Lounge. See that little red dot where it says the point where the fire started? And here's exactly what happened. There was a soldier, and I'll be delicate, putting the moves on a young lady in a corner booth. He wasn't assaulting her, it was mutual attraction. He felt that the overhead light was cramping his style, so we unscrewed the light. The bartender, a guy by the name of Daniel Weiss, a fourth-year BU medical student, tells the busboy, Stanley Tomaszewski, listen, put that light back on, these people are gonna walk the check. So the 16-year-old busboy goes over there, looks into the socket where the individual, we don't know his name, had unscrewed the light bulb, and he can't find the socket So he strikes a match to look for it. This is historical fact. And Stanley Tomaszewski finds the socket, and he finds the light bulb, screws it back in, and much to the chagrin of the young man and the young woman, blows out the match, steps on the match. What happens after that is subject to varying interpretations. Some saw smoke, some noted an odd odor, some saw fire. The eyewitness descriptions really vary. But we had the unscrewed light bulb, we had the match, and it'll show up in the headlines as to what most people thought was the cause of the fire. This is Stanley Tomaszewski, 16 years old, underpaid. I told you Danny Weiss was the bartender. Both survived the fire. I just think I'm trying to draw as many medical analogies as I can here. It's just a kid trying to work through medical school. But Danny Weiss was Barney Walensky's nephew, and Barney Walensky hired him so no one would walk the check. And this kid would keep an eye on the cash register. So what happens is this fire takes off. We already told you that it started. And there was some futile attempts at putting it out. People threw water at it. The bartender jumped over the bar and threw a wet rag on it. But nothing could control what had started with the reinsertion of the light bulb and the striking of the match. Now, I did come across an entity, and the expertise in the front row can correct me if I'm wrong. There is an entity in fire activity called the chimney effect. And we've all seen this in fireplaces at home. You have warm air from the fireplace being fed by cool air that comes down to feed the fire. Now, if you look at this diagram of the chimney effect, I'll call your attention to the stairway leading up from the Melody Lounge. That stairway acted, according to researchers, as a chimney for the fire that would eventually engulf the entire nightclub. Meanwhile, everybody's upstairs, having a ball. The Melody Lounge is starting to fill with smoke. There was a disturbance in the main dining room, but Mickey Albert, the band leader, thought it was either someone who was inebriated or maybe people still fighting over the result of the football game that I mentioned earlier. But eventually, smoke started billowing up that stairway, and panic ensued. The problem was that the doors had been locked from the outside. Some had been cemented over, and the main exit was a revolving door, which I'll show you in just a minute. The military people in the nightclub knew that to prevent inhalation injury, you just soak a towel in water, get on the ground, and breathe through it. And those who did that actually survived. And if water wasn't available, I'll be delicate, other body fluids were used to soak the towel, get down on the ground, and breathe. As the fire escalated, and as the panic ensued, everyone started rushing, that's a little Buck Jones there, everyone started rushing to the exits. A couple of things about the exits. Number one, the doors, as I said, were sealed shut from the outside, many of the exit doors in these photos here. The main problem was the philosophy of Barney Walensky. You can't beat the check, so nobody's going to get out without paying. And on YouTube, there's a summary of all this called 6 locked doors, which is the number of doors that were sealed over. This is a recreation of the mad panic for the revolving door that got stuck and littered with asphyxiated patrons. That was the problem. And here's what this beautiful nightclub looked like after the fire was put out. The fire lasted 27 minutes. It was, as one writer put it, it defied the science of studying fires. The fire department was in the neighborhood putting out a car fire, and then all the alarms went out, and you can see with these photos what ensued. Bodies were pulled out and were tried to be identified in makeshift morgues that were set up in the neighborhood. These are photos from the Boston Globe of that night. Now, made sense. What caused the fire? Obviously, it was the busboys' match. This poor kid, Stanley Tomaszewski, a very poor family, I think he was like $2.80 a night, and the newspapers repeatedly published the busboys' match was the cause of the fire. I don't know if Dr. Slavin's in the audience. Our new CEO is from Malden. I wanted him to know that the Malden Casket Company was extremely busy that night when the call went out. Well, that's all well and good, but what about the survivors, or the people who survived the fires, which gets us to the medical preparations for this catastrophe. The two main hospitals that received these burn victims were the Boston City Hospital, your classic city hospital, and the Massachusetts General Hospital. Which gets us to chapter 4, the aftermath. And I'll briefly describe the medical, legal, architectural, and personal aftermath of the fire. This is what the front of the nightclub looked like after the fire was extinguished. Now, the main cause of death and the main injury with which the doctors were confronted was respiratory and inhalation injury. Subsequent to that was the identification of shock and the treatment of shock because of the loss of body fluids from burns. Wound management, you would understand because you could actually see the burns. That was pretty obvious to the doctors. And at this point, antibiotics were not widely manufactured. Mass production of penicillin was not available in 1942. The primary sources that describe the use of antibiotics actually refer to the antibiotics as chemotherapy. The term antibiotics had not come in yet. And then, of course, when everything was over, what happened to the people who did survive but lost the loved ones? So are these hospitals ready? Well, change of shift for those who don't work in hospitals is when one set of nurses leaves and another shows up. Typical day is 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and at 11 o'clock, one shift leaves and another shows up. I believe this is the first time in the 2,500-year history of medicine where the change of shift actually benefited patients, because this fire struck and they started bringing patients to the hospitals during the change of shift. So you had twice as many nurses, some leaving, some going, some arriving. In addition to that, there was a giant holiday party at Boston City Hospital where off-duty doctors and off-duty nurses showed up. A year earlier, what would become the NIH gave money to the Mass General and Boston City Hospital for programs. There was actually a citywide drill for attacks. Don't forget, we were at war in November of 1942. And of course, there was a focus on burn care, which was the major injury at Pearl Harbor, and the use of plasma to resuscitate humans in substitute for whole blood. So just by the numbers, you had 300 patients taken to Boston City Hospital and 114 patients taken to the Massachusetts General Hospital. This is the largest number of patients ever delivered to hospitals on a single night in the history of the United States. It is the largest number of patients. It dwarfed any night during the Blitz, of which I have a picture on the left. There's 414 patients, and where did they go? Some went to Boston City, some went to Mass General. And the preparedness, when I say America was prepared, there was shelling on the West Coast, an oil field on the West Coast, and a lot of people don't know it, but there were German submarine attacks on the East Coast, and we learned the bitter lesson of Pearl Harbor with that preparedness drill. Well, are we prepared for such a mass casualty? 132 people were dead on arrival at Boston City. At Mass General, 39 were dead on arrival. Well, I'm going to just list some names here because these are all big shot names in the history of medicine and surgery. At Mass General, you had Oliver Cope, probably best known for his work in parathyroid. You had Richard Shotsky, Tracy Mallory, and of course Francis Moore. a legendary name in surgical and medical education. And you had a great crew at Boston City Hospital, particularly Lund and Browder, who developed a method of resuscitation. Well, on this night, with that catastrophe, the doctors had met the moment. Now, I know a lot of people in this room. I never liked walking into a medical establishment and seeing beautiful portraits of the legends of surgery, because all of us who have been through residency know they may be big shots, but a lot of them weren't nice guys. They were tough. But nevertheless, I have respect for them when I found out how old they were the night of this catastrophe. Bradford Cannon, who some of us actually met during training or worked with during training, was tail end of his career, was 35 years old the night of the fire. He was the one who collected all the papers that arose. Oliver Cope, legendary name, was only 40 years old. These are people just at the beginning or mid career. He wrote the definitive paper that collected all of the advances. And then, of course, we had Tracy Mallory of the Mallory-Weiss tear in surgery, and Richard Shotsky of the Shotsky ring. I look at these guys. These guys were people who could look beyond the immediate into the future. You know, I don't have a mind like that. I just take care of the immediate problem and, you know, Zygazont, I'll see you in 6 weeks. These guys had the vision to look to the future of burn cure. I look at these guys, and it reminds me of a phone call. My father called me. I was halfway through medical school. I don't know why he called me. He said, "Leo, how you doing in medical school?" He knew it was very competitive. And I said, "Dad," I said, "look at it this way. If it weren't for me, there would not be an upper half of the class." Now, I don't know if he totally understood that, but you know, that was the answer I gave him. And then, of course, Francis Moore. Francis Moore was 27 years old when he was on call at the Mass General Hospital that night. And let's just take a first-person account. This is Franny Moore. Charlie Burbank and I were two surgical residents in charge of the emergency ward on November 28, 1942. We worked together days and nights for many months. It had been a quiet evening just after Thanksgiving, the time when the football games were being settled. We were up in our rooms listening to football. Then we heard a series of ambulances arriving at the hospital. We got to the emergency ward pretty fast. The smell of burnt clothes and hair permeated the entryway and the hall. And he summarized all of this in his book, A Miracle and a Privilege. It was certainly a miracle for the residents to get through his service, I'll tell you that. Now, these are specimens from people who died at the Mass General Hospital. I'll call your attention to the fact that you're looking at an inhalation injury. You can see the larynx, and you can see the dark soot-covered tissue, and also the redness and the swelling. The quote by Oliver Cope is that they were dealing not only with burned skin, but some new form of inhalation injury. They couldn't quite figure it out. And please keep in mind that this is before ventilators, before respirators, before blood gases, before pulse oximetry. There was the doctor, the patient, and the tools that they had. And the unfortunate lady on the right has no burns on her at all, but is dead from these inhalation injuries. What could cause such a severe inhalation injury other than the fire itself? Because they noted that the injuries went deeper into the lungs, more so than any other fire they had ever seen. It's called necrotizing, medical term for death of tissue, tracheobronchitis, which is inflammation of the smaller breathing tubes. Methyl chloride was suspected as a refrigerant when ignited, could cause inhalation injuries. Some of the surgeons were old enough to remember gas warfare from World War I, and several theories of sabotage and Nazi infiltration to cause the fire have been floated over the years for this event. In 1929, there was a fire at the Cleveland Clinic that killed 112 people because the Cleveland Clinic building, prior to becoming a hospital, was a film storage unit. The Coconut Grove, prior to becoming a nightclub, was a film storage unit. And the chemical of burned film gave rise to those horrible injuries. Talked about the treatment of shock, which led to the development of what's called the rule of nines, which is the way you assign fluid to a patient based on the percentage of burns that are done, the so-called Lunn-Browder diagram that became the rule of nines. And of course, wound management. And this is very interesting to me, to everybody, because you can see these wounds. On the left, you have the way they treated the wounds at Boston City Hospital. They covered the burns with tannic acid. It was called the triple dye technique. They were wedded to it. This is the way we treat burns at Boston City Hospital. On the other hand, the Massachusetts General Hospital treated burns by applying boric acid ointment and covering the wound with gauze, and then coming back in 5 or 6 days to see what happened. So you had two competing methods of treating burns. If you were to design a study to figure out which was best, this would be what you would do. It would be a two-armed study. Well, eventually, the Boston City Hospital realized that their treatment was ineffective and adopted the Massachusetts General Hospital method of treating burns. These are actual victims from the fire, and you can see the progression under the Mass General treatment to normal skin. Several of us in the room here trained at Tufts, and the abbreviation for Mass General is MGH, and I'm going to be proper, and I won't tell you what we thought MGH stood for. But this is the evolution of burn treatment, both facial burns and hand burns, as well as the use of plasma and saline. And all of these were disseminated through the medical literature from treating these patients. The volume of plasma used for the Coconut Grove burns was larger than the volume of plasma used for the survivors of the Pearl Harbor attack. It was a godsend because you didn't need whole blood. You could separate the plasma from the blood regardless of a type, and you could resuscitate a patient. Hundreds of papers arose. They covered every conceivable aspect of burn care. And I include ER management and hospital management in all of those papers. What would become PTSD was addressed by Dr. Alexandra Adler at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and we'll get to some of the survivor stories in just a minute. Does anybody know what this word means? Obsequy. I had to look it up. An obsequy is a funeral rite, an apology for an erroneous statement or something like that. And I was taken with this because in this day and age of the occasional article about academic fraud, because the chits on the board, the stepping stones to academia, are the papers that you write. But I found this very refreshing when the Boston City Hospital realized that their treatment of burns was ineffective, and they published a paper, an obsequy, an apology to the public that we stuck to our guns a little bit too long, because the tannic acid treatment led to liver failure and other fallout. Well, this may seem like a rhetorical question. What caused the fire at the Coconut Grove? We got the kid with the match, we got the flammable thing, we got flames, we got the whole thing. I don't think, and the gentleman in the front row can correct me, I don't think there's been a fire in the history of America that's been studied more than the Coconut Grove fire. Every conceivable aspect. And this is the final conclusion of the investigation. So I investigated all possible causes. This fire will be entered in the records of this department as being of unknown origin. Well, how can that be? We had a kid light a match, we had the place burst into flames. Witnesses said the walls felt warm well before the fire, giving rise to a suspicion of ineffective wiring. Others noted a faint odor, giving rise to a methyl chloride or some gas leak. There were so many conflicting eyewitness reports after this exhaustive investigation, unknown origin. Investigation led to outrage when everything came out. There were no food handlers permits, no liquor licenses, no building permits, underage employment, and as I mentioned, construction and electrical approval. And the nightclub had been declared safe by the Boston Fire Department 10 days earlier, including a statement that the inspector tried to light one of the palm fronds and it wouldn't burn. The real cause of deaths, not the cause of the fire, were the locked doors, the inadequate exits, the crowded conditions, and this statement I've thought a lot about. The speed of this fire defies all the science of fire growth. You could say that the deaths were caused by greed. Lock the doors, don't walk to check, cram in as many people as possible. Architecturally, and all of these laws were in place in the city of Boston, but the Cocoanut Grove fire just reinforced them. Exit signs, fire retardant decorations, maximum occupancy, and for the sake of our guests, I hope we're not exceeding it tonight. I don't think we are. I think the most fascinating photo that comes out of this is the fact that when you go to a hotel or other public place and they have a revolving door, there are two doors on either side. And I'll be honest with you, I thought that was put in 1990 with the Americans with Disability Act. It wasn't. It was put in by the study and result of the Cocoanut Grove fire. I thought it was there to accommodate people in wheelchairs and walkers, but it wasn't. The doors have to open on either side of the revolving door. And then, of course, outward door sprinklers were in use, but again, this was a restaurant, not a place of public gathering. Instructing your employees on fire safety, and of course the unknown, the X factor, panic, which is why people for years after this always checked the exits and how to get out. And this is the picture that's going to stick with me in preparing these remarks. I'm not a lawyer, but Barney Wilansky and others were charged with involuntary manslaughter, conspiracy to violate building codes. Other people were indicted. Even the contractors, and Barney Wilansky went to trial and was found guilty after the indictments and was sentenced to 12 to 15 years of hard labor in the Charleston, Massachusetts prison, as was Bodenhorn, the nightclub's architect, but he only served a short term. Barney Wilansky developed metastatic lung cancer about a year in. He was pardoned by Mayor Tobin in 1944, and upon exiting the Charlestown prison, said, "I only wish I had been at the fire and died with those others." He took the rap for it, and again, it was a new precedent in Massachusetts for involuntary manslaughter because it was not just failure to follow a law, it was the intentional failure to follow the law. I'm going to end with a personal note. No one in this hall can envision the level of grief, misery of 492 deaths. You just can't do it. We don't have, to use the current term, the bandwidth to do it. So I've selected a few people from this fire that can really bring this home, and oddly enough, the first person I'm going to select is Stanley Tomaszewski. This kid wound up on the front page when the headline was already set about the Boston Massacre and the loss of the football game. This 16-year-old kid was subjected to venom, hatred, assaults, and headline after headline said it was the busboys match, the busboys match. This kid killed 492 people by lighting a match. Everybody rallied around him eventually, and he said shortly before his death, "I wish people would let a dead horse die." Getting calls in the middle of the night and death threats I've just about had. He was actually under police guard for 6 months after the fire. He served in World War II, passed away at age 64. Now, a lot of colleges in Boston and students from these universities died in the Coconut Grove fire for obvious geographic reasons, 5 from Harvard, 5 from MIT. I just found these little nuggets of information just fascinating. 4 people died on their birthday. The bookkeeper of the Coconut Grove lived to age 98. She was married to Mr. Ponzi of the Ponzi scheme. You can't make this up. It's just the random nature of life. Unfortunate for the equipment manager who made the reservation for the Boston College Eagles, he said to his wife, "I got a reservation for 60. We lost the game. Let's take advantage of it and go for ourselves," which they did. There was Larry, Kenny, and his wife. They died. 20 years after the fire, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis Price, who survived the fire, committed suicide together. Whether it was survivor's guilt, they were the only survivors of a party of 14 that night, we'll never know. Buck Jones, the movie star, had a party of 29. He died along with 16 other people. And this death I found fascinating. Francis Turner of Roslindale is counted as a death. He was in the Boston City Hospital for 2 months. He jumped out of a 4th-story window and committed suicide. He is counted as one of the deaths. You sign up to fight a war, you don't think you're going to die in a nightclub fire, as 64 people do. The first 2 member of the Waves, the Volunteer Emergency Service for Women in the U.S. Navy, died from Winthrop and from Waltham. A 25-year-old war bond salesgirl died in the fire. 2 rescue workers from the nearby Statler Hotel came over to help. They died. They were asphyxiated. 4 pregnant women died during the fire. 2 pregnant women survived and went on to deliver. It affected 23 states. I'm always looking for this. 1 surgeon died in the fire. Get to him in a minute. The oldest people to die in the fire was a 61-year-old man with his 41-year-old wife, Isaac and Minnie Gordon, no relation. I had to include that. And Buck Jones's death affected the Hollywood community to just an unbelievable degree. Now, life is funny. Think of the people that missed their flights on 9/11. Think of people who just missed the train that drove off a bridge. My mother was born in Lowell. 3 girls from Lowell wanted to have a night in the town. They drove to Boston. They got to the Coconut Grove. It was jammed. They were turned away. Unlike the 4 Fitzgerald brothers of Wilmington, who all died in the fire, 4 brothers. Now, I went to college in Iowa. I spent a lot of time there. When you talk about siblings dying in the fire, if you know anything about the state of Iowa, you're going to remember the Sullivan brothers. All 5 Sullivan brothers died on the USS Juneau earlier in that month, which led to the Navy prohibiting siblings from serving on the same ship. The O'Neills were married at 2 o'clock at the Statler Hotel and went to the Coconut Grove for their wedding dinner. People say, well, how do they get that picture? And as I pointed out, in those days, there would be a picture girl that would come by and take your picture, go off-site, develop it, and then when you picked up your coat, you could pick up your picture. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but this is extremely personal to any of the surgical residents in the room. John McPherson was one of the surgeons who treated these injured patients, and they brought in a recently graduated surgical resident, a guy by the name of Gordon Bennett. And he said he was always quiet, polite, and cheerful, even at Boston City Hospital, which is a real tribute. It'll tell you something about working at a city hospital. He was captain of the Dartmouth football team, a very efficient house officer, never drank, never smoked, never been to a nightclub. He was there with his girlfriend and his friends celebrating his first wedding anniversary. And then it says, the boys on T surgical services are listed either by number or letter. The boys on T surgical, his own service, took care of him. And when a doctor takes care of another doctor, it's really something very special. And unfortunately, Gordon Bennett died, as did many prominent New England athletes who were at the club that night. You can't talk about the whims of fate unless you mention Clifford Johnson. Somebody sent me an email about Clifford Johnson, or about the Coast Guard last week. Clifford Johnson was the most severely burned patient at the fire who survived. 55 to 60% third-degree burns, 22 months in Boston City Hospital. What a shock. He falls in love and marries his nurse. He leaves the hospital. He goes back to Missouri. And here he is after his recovery. Here are the newlyweds. 14 years after he moves back to Missouri, he goes out to run an errand. He picks up whatever he had to pick up. He's driving back home. His car skids off the road. The gas tank ruptures. He's covered with gasoline and burns to death. So, have fun every day. This is probably the survivor that's talked about the most. There is a small tribute to the Coconut Grove in Boston. There was a plaque on the ground that commemorated this event. However, the developers came in and built a very expensive set of condominiums, and the owner said to the city council, listen, we're building these condominiums. I don't want a plaque on the front door, on the front sidewalk, where people have to walk over it and be reminded that 492 people died here. So they eventually moved the plaque. I've relied heavily on these books, particularly the Shoro book that describes the generational trauma that this fire engendered. If you have a couple bucks left at the end of the month, please go to the Coconut Grove Memorial Committee. There will be a dedication of a memorial to this event that will go up in Statler Park, very close to the site, and I've corresponded with Michael Hanlon, who is the coordinator of that committee. Well, we started off with Prometheus, who made a big mistake. He stole fire from the gods. How are the gods going to punish Prometheus? And I hope there were some medical students or residents in the hall, because what Zeus on Mount Olympus did to Prometheus, who stole fire, he chained Prometheus to a rock, opened up his right upper quadrant, exposed his liver, because the ancients thought that the seat of the human soul was the liver. Not the brain, not the heart, the liver. And every day a vulture would come down and chew away at Prometheus's liver. And the liver, because it regenerates so easily, this was an eternal punishment. And for the students, if the lecturer on liver surgery doesn't show this slide, give me a call and we'll set them straight. Listen, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And particularly our first responders, our firefighters, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. It's just a wonderful thing. Okay, I brought it in 49 minutes. Any questions? Yes, go to the microphone, because I'm not sure I can. Okay. Dr. Bliss, that's the most work he's done in the last 5 years.
It's not a question. It's basically a commendation. I'm a fan, Dr. Gordon. I've listened to your lectures on the ailments of the presidents, the Warsaw Ghetto, and I must tell you, I don't know how you find time to do this comprehensive research. This thing was a thriller. It was a movie. It was, you sort of had the background in Boston in wartime, and, the whole milieu. You described the whole milieu. And the words really failed me. I really don't have a question because it's so comprehensive. But you should, you're not only a very prestigious doctor, but you could have been a great, great filmmaker. And I salute you, I really do. It's not a question.
You're very kind. I had a lot of help.
Well, us having about over 100 years of of experience in the fire service applaud you. This was phenomenal. Captured me from the very, well, I'm sure all of us from the very beginning, but just to see like the rule of nines that we still use today, and everything, how it's just interconnected with history. Blame the spillover that goes over for families and generations, and it's the same type of tragedy that's happened recently with the January fires, right? It just continues on, and it goes from generations. So thank you for what you're doing and what you did. I think everybody here appreciates that. So from the Los Angeles City, I won't speak for Tony Maroney, but from the Los Angeles City Fire Department and the Los Angeles County Fire Department, Chief Moore, who's here, the Coens, who invited us as well. But it was quite an experience that I will not forget, and I definitely will share. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Gordon, I mentioned to you that I have taught about this fire for 10 years at Rio Hondo College, where I taught building construction, fire prevention, and arson investigation. And you hit the nail on the head. There's no other fire that's been studied and talked about as much as the Coconut Grove fire. And we still, if you remember the station fire, we still have nightclub fires. And they're driven by greed, packing people in to see shows, locking doors so people don't sneak in. And we have yet to learn from these historic events and continue to lose lives. The message that you shared today, not just from a fire department standpoint and a fire prevention standpoint, but how you tied it into the medical field and incorporated everything for the doctors who are present today was amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this and the work you put into this. I'd love to take you to both Los Angeles City and County Fire Department to share this with our firefighters, because this is historic and we need to remember this.
Thank you. I did tell Dr. Peruzzi I forgot my honorarium tonight, so it's...
Hey, Leo.
Yes, Dave.
I've said this to you many times, but nobody has enriched the cultural life of the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center like you have. I also had the sad realization, 70% or so through your talk, that 80 to 85% of what I know has come from you, which is pretty sad.
Well, Dave, he went to Yale when it was a good school.
It was not easy to get Leo to speak. He said, when I'm ready, I'll tell you. So Leo had to go back to 1942. So we all have to help Leo find subject to do research and continue to endow us with a tremendous ability to present things and to do research. So if anybody has idea, please let us know.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody.